Black shorts, white stripes, black baseball cap.
What's your arms, fella?
It's on my shoulder.
Got it. Have you,
Blue lights cut across the night sky. From above, a police helicopter tracks a white Mercedes van as it hurtles down the M56. The driver, Neil Corrian, refuses to stop. He mounts pavements, slams through barriers, and even drives the wrong way around roundabouts, straight toward Manchester Airport. This wasn't a film chase. It was real. A man throwing everything away in a last, chaotic gamble. And while one van tore across Britain's motorways, another man's empire worth £100 million was quietly crumbling from a single roadside stop. Two very different lives. Two very different downfalls. But both are tied together by the same poison, drugs, money, and destruction. If you think this kind of chaos could never touch your city, think again. Stories like this erupt across Britain every year. Subscribe now, because the next case we cover might already be happening just miles from your home. And if you still won't, go to the comments and tell us why you'd rather stay blind to the danger. Marcus Callahan didn't look like a drug boss. To neighbours in Stalybridge, Manchester, he was the picture of a young entrepreneur. 34 years old, well-dressed, and polite. He set up Callahan Solutions Limited, a company that, on paper, traded legitimately. In reality, it was nothing more than a front. Behind the office doors and email signatures, Callahan was structuring one of the most organized drug enterprises in northern England. He built it like a corporation. Layers of workers. Ledgers in multiple languages. Hire cars and burner phones that rotated with military precision. Callahan's empire wasn't loud. It was quiet, calculated, and designed to pass as professional. It fooled many for years. But not everyone in this story played the role of empire builder. Neil Corrian, from Caton near Scarborough, was 42. He didn't have front companies. No polished image. He was a courier, a dealer, a lone operator who relied on his van and his willingness to take risks. Where Callahan relied on strategy and structure, Corrian relied on speed, nerve, and chance. The contrast could not have been sharper. One man building a £100 million line with the polish of a corporate CEO, the other running single-handed consignments, gambling on every run. But both men posed the same danger, feeding Britain's addiction, fueling the same networks of destruction. What makes the story darker is that neither stood out as obvious criminals. Callahan hid behind boardrooms and spreadsheets. Corrian behind an ordinary van. Both could pass you in a supermarket, and you would never know. That was their power, criminals in plain sight. Marcus Callahan's empire didn't appear overnight. Like a carefully constructed business plan, he began by surrounding himself with men he could trust, or at least men he believed he could control. At the top of his hierarchy was Theo Henry, 30 years old, a right-hand man who acted as Callahan's deputy. Below him, Theo's younger brother, Colonel Henry, just 25, took on the role of courier. He drove consignments from Manchester into Teesside, a route that would become the lifeline of the operation. Callahan also relied on Rui Xu, 39, a money man operating out of Birmingham. Police later uncovered Mandarin language ledgers in his possession, proof of a sophisticated financial arm built into the network. Then there was Thomas Jaffrey, 34, who managed the Middlesbrough end of the supply line. Each one had a defined role. Each one fitted into the structure like employees in a corporation. It was organized crime that mirrored legitimate business. To stay ahead of detection, Callahan issued what investigators later described as an instruction manual. Hired cars would be used for runs, not personal vehicles. Burner phones were distributed, swapped, and discarded in constant rotation. Couriers never stayed on the same pattern for long. From the outside, the group looked ordinary. From the inside, it was a disciplined, industrial-scale drug line. But while Callahan built his network like a CEO, Neil Corrigan's methods were far rougher. Corrian relied on a single van. No hierarchy, no elaborate laundering, no trusted lieutenants, just himself, drugs hidden in the back, and the risk of being stopped at any moment. Every trip down a motorway was a gamble, every roundabout a chance for disaster. Where Callahan spread the risk across dozens of hands, Corrigan carried it all on his own shoulders. The contrast was striking. One man operated with corporate efficiency, building a machine that generated millions. The other pushed his luck on dangerous runs, betting on nerve and timing. Yet in their own ways, both men contributed to the same devastation: heroin and cocaine flooding British streets, communities buckling under the weight of addiction, and families torn apart. By late 2017, Marcus Callahan's operation had grown beyond a local line. What began as carefully managed courier runs between Manchester and Teesside became a wholesale supply network. Police surveillance showed a steady rhythm of consignments: cocaine, heroin, and cannabis moving in industrial quantities. Each run looked like a delivery job. Hired cars came and went, drivers swapped, and phones rotated. To an outsider, it seemed unremarkable. But behind the disguise of normality, millions of pounds of drugs were flowing north. Callahan treated it like a business expansion. Teesside became a reliable market. Middlesbrough safe houses were stocked and replenished. Couriers handed over consignments, picked up cash, and returned down the A19. Every link in the chain was carefully managed. It was a criminal enterprise, but it ran with the efficiency of a logistics company. And while shipments flowed, Callahan perfected the art of presentation. On New Year's Eve 2017, Edinburgh police noted him staying in luxury hotels and entertaining clients in VIP sections of nightclubs. Magnums of rosé champagne costing £395 each, premium vodka, and mixers flowing through the night. It looked like excess. But it was more than celebration, it was corporate hospitality for criminals. A way to lock in loyalty, reward buyers, and build trust in a business where betrayal could cost millions. Underneath the glamour, cracks were already forming. Surveillance teams were closing in, piecing together patterns from automatic number plate recognition cameras. Ledger books, later seized, showed tens of millions moving each week. Callahan's insistence on professionalism gave investigators more to study. His meticulous records, his constant use of hire cars, even his attempts to launder money through foreign currencies like yen, each detail became a thread police could pull. And yet, for those inside the network, it seemed untouchable. Callahan moved freely between Manchester penthouses and Teesside safe houses. His lieutenants were loyal, his profits untold. To them, it looked like the rise would never end. But unseen, surveillance cameras, undercover units, and financial investigators were watching. Every bottle uncorked, every handshake in a nightclub, every car that passed a motorway camera, it was all logged. The rise wasn't just a success story. It was the beginning of the end. Think about it, while you're watching this, others are watching you. Dealers rely on communities staying silent. Subscribing isn't just support, it's awareness. If you won't, then at least write in the comments why you'd rather let these stories stay buried. By the height of his operation, Marcus Callahan wasn't running a street gang. He was running what prosecutors later described as an industrial-scale drug empire. The numbers told the story. Ledgers uncovered during police raids calculated turnover in excess of £100 million. Even after seizures and setbacks, his network continued to move consignments worth tens of millions. When the dust finally settled, officers recovered more than £32 million worth of heroin, cocaine, and cannabis from his operation alone. And that was just what they found. Investigators warned the true figure of drugs moved across the country was far higher. Callahan's empire had features that went far beyond the normal framework of organized crime. He laundered profits through foreign currencies, yen among them, suggesting links to international channels of movement. Investigators described it as a multinational-style laundering system, designed to fragment cash and disguise its origin. What looked like a businessman changing money for a trip abroad was, in reality, a network converting millions of pounds of criminal profit. Outwardly, Callahan never dropped the facade. To neighbors and acquaintances, he appeared as a company director, a young man who had cracked the world of enterprise. He rented properties in good areas, drove cars that suggested success without drawing excessive suspicion, and spoke the language of business. But behind closed doors, the businessman's veneer crumbled into reality: stockpiles of drugs, weapons hidden in compartments, and ledgers tracking consignments worth more than most firms would see in a lifetime. On the 2nd of February 2018, the empire began to crumble. Neil Henry, Callahan's courier, was driving along the A19 when police moved in. What looked like a routine traffic stop exposed the scale of the operation. Inside the vehicle, officers found 12 kilograms of cocaine and heroin. On the wholesale market, it was valued at more than £300,000. On the street, it was worth over £4 million. One seizure, one courier, and the illusion of an untouchable empire began to collapse. Within 48 hours, raids were launched on Callahan's base of operations. What police found stripped away the last of his businessman's facade. Hidden compartments built into properties and vehicles. Cash ranging from £14,000 to £200,000. And weapons: an Ingram Mag 11 submachine gun with 51 rounds of ammunition, a weapon designed for warfare, not street disputes. Alongside the guns were drugs, heroin, cocaine, and more than 40 kilograms of cannabis. It was proof of scale. Proof of intent. Proof of danger. The surveillance operation that had shadowed Callahan for months finally tied every piece together. Automatic number plate recognition confirmed the hire car runs. Phone analysis linked the burners. Financial investigation traced the foreign currency. Each thread of evidence was drawn together into a net, and now, there was no escape. For Callahan and his lieutenants, the turning point came not with a dramatic betrayal inside their own ranks, but with something far simpler. A single traffic stop. A set of drugs hidden in plain sight. It was enough to unpick a £100 million empire and expose the men who had hidden in ordinary streets, behind ordinary doors, for far too long. In September 2018, the case finally reached Manchester Crown Court. After years of surveillance, seizures, and raids, prosecutors laid bare what they called an industrial-scale drug operation. The figures were staggering. Hundreds of kilos of Class A drugs moved, more than £32 million worth of seizures, and profits estimated well above £100 million. This wasn't street dealing. It was organized crime at its most structured. Marcus Callahan sat at the center of it all. For months, he had insisted he was just a caretaker, a man minding properties and cars for others. But the jury heard the evidence. The weapons, the ledgers, the burner phones, the coded conversations, and the currency exchanges in yen. Piece by piece, prosecutors dismantled his facade. They showed the hierarchy beneath him: couriers like Neil Henry and lieutenants like Theo Henry, Rui Xu, and Thomas Jaffrey. Each had a role. Each was part of the machine. The defense painted Callahan as a small player, a man in over his head. But the jury didn't believe it. After weeks of testimony, they rejected his claims outright. What remained was the picture investigators had drawn from the very beginning: Callahan as the architect of a criminal empire. Sentencing was swift and severe. Marcus Callahan was handed 24 years. His closest associate, Theo Henry, acting as his right-hand man, was jailed for 21. Neil Henry, the courier intercepted on the A19 with 12 kilos of heroin and cocaine, was sentenced to 12. Rui Xu, the Birmingham-based money man who managed Mandarin ledgers and laundered profits, received 6 years. Thomas Jaffrey, who oversaw the Teesside end of the line, was jailed for 13 years and 4 months. Stephen Sewell, another key figure in the supply chain, was handed 10 years and 8 months. Richard Llewellyn, trusted with safe houses and logistics, was sentenced to 7 years. And Jerome Hamilton, who helped wash drug profits through false transactions, received 4 years. Judge Martin Rudland made it clear in his closing words. He described the devastation that heroin and cocaine bring to communities across Britain. Families broken, lives lost, streets scarred by addiction and violence. He told the court that Callahan and his network had fueled that destruction for profit, and that only long custodial sentences could reflect the seriousness of their crimes. For Callahan, the fall was final. The businessman's image was gone. The empire was stripped bare. What remained was a cell, a sentence, and a legacy of devastation stretching from Manchester to Teesside. By the time the final sentences were handed down, what once looked like a £100 million empire had been reduced to evidence bags, ledgers, and prison terms. Callahan's organisation, built with the precision of a business, was dismantled cell by cell, courier by courier, until nothing remained but convictions and a cautionary legacy. But while one network was collapsing, another figure was already writing his own chapter. In March 2024, Neil Corrian was spotted behind the wheel of a white Mercedes van on the M56. A police helicopter followed as he mounted curbs, drove the wrong way around roundabouts, and smashed through barriers at Manchester Airport in a desperate attempt to escape. Officers later recovered 2 kilograms of heroin, worth around £142,000, thrown from the van during the pursuit. 2 months later, at Chester Crown Court, Corrigan pleaded guilty to supplying Class A drugs, to dangerous driving, and to driving without insurance. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison, with a further driving ban of 5 years and 4 months. The difference between Callahan and Corrigan was scale, an empire builder versus a lone courier, but their outcomes were the same: prison walls and shattered communities left behind. These cases tell a single truth: whether a man runs an empire worth millions or risks everything on one desperate chase, the result is destruction. Families broken, lives consumed by addiction, communities scarred by drugs. The names may change, but the story repeats. Marcus Callahan built a £100 million empire and lost it all. Neil Corrian gambled everything on a single chase and ended up behind bars. 2 men, 2 paths, one ending, prison walls and the devastation left behind. If you're interested in stories like this, don't be the one who lets them pass you by without knowing. Make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell, so the next time another empire rises or another chase unfolds, you'll be the first to see the truth.